is this a bad rap, that CSS is getting here? And if so, like, what are the things that people really need to be learning so that this isn't the big deal? Because I just think we're not doing a very good job of teaching those fundamentals of CSS.
The way I usually look at it is like CSS tricks people into seeming like a simpler language than it is.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's declarative. Property.
CSS tricks
right.
people. I'm like, you're talking about CSS tricks.com?
So it's like, it's property value pairs. That's easy. And then you start learning it, and it's color red, background blue. Oh, look, it's working. This isn't easy. It's a simple language. And then you get through some of the basics. You think you get it, and then all of a sudden it gets hard.
Right.
And it's because it's declarative where it's like one for one, except then you do a display flex, and then just doing that one thing gives you like 8 new properties that have a whole bunch of new values in there. So you pulled one lever, and then you had 10 new levers that all just showed up that you have to be able to control and understand. And you get that all over the place just with some of the simple stuff.
Hey, welcome back. In this episode, Kevin Powell discusses the evolution of CSS from CSS 3 to modern advancements like Flexbox and Grid, the integration of JavaScript-like features, and the future of tools like Tailwind and Sass.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Modern Web Podcast. My name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet.
And I'm Rob Ocell. You can find me online at RoboCell.
Oh yeah, and you can follow me on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. So that's exciting. And today we're joined by another guest here at that conference. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Kevin Powell. I primarily teach people about CSS.
Yeah. Do you do it full time, by the way?
I do, yeah.
Oh my gosh, full-time content creator?
Yeah.
Whoa. That's brave.
It's, accidental, but it's here now and it worked out. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah.
I absolutely love that. Okay, well tell us where we can find you and a little bit more about yourself.
You can get me on Twitter or X. It's Kevin J. Powell. And if you look up Kevin Powell on YouTube, you'll probably find me, or just look up any CSS related content and I'll show up on YouTube, basically.
Yeah. That's so great. Okay, awesome. So what's exciting about CSS these days, and how did you kind of fall into it, and how do we grow up to be like you?
Fall into CSS or fall into making content about CSS?
Well, I guess you could answer both.
For me, it's something that I sort of accidentally got into, and I really enjoyed just the development side of things. I was doing WordPress child themes. I would just delete the CSS file and write CSS. And I like that side of stuff. I ended up becoming a teacher and then got bored teaching beginner content, so I started making YouTube videos for fun so I could talk about things I liked instead of just the beginner content over and over again.
Sure.
And that's, sort of how I fell into it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And now I just get to try my best to keep up with it because it's changing so quickly. It was
like content creation is changing, or CSS?
The CSS, yeah. Like the CSS is weird because it went through like that long phase where it just didn't change, and then CSS 3 happened, and that was like everyone's like, we can do border radiuses now. Like we don't have to slice up a Photoshop document to make a round corner, right. And there was like gradients and stuff that was all like cosmetic things, but it was cool because we could do it. And then nothing happened again for a really long time, and then Flexbox happened and Grid happened, and then now the speed of it just seems to be going faster and faster. So asking what's excited about it, I think there's lots of stuff that's really cool.
Do you have a sense in the community why that is? Is it just the standards got smoothed out, or the people involved, or what's really moving things?
Yeah, so part of it was there was, when CSS 3 happened, they realized, or even CSS 2 was like, the first spec was a disaster. The second one, let's fix it, make it so it's actually more of a standard. And then when 3 happened, they realized the problem was it had grown too big, that like if we're gonna make a new spec, like we have so much to cover now. So then they split it all. Every piece is basically its own spec now.
Oh, there we go, okay.
So you have like the layout one, you have colors as its own one, and they're all at their different levels and they can advance at their own speeds. So it helps.
And this is through WhatWig or W3C or?
Yeah, the CSS working group.
Okay, got it.
So now they're able to work a lot faster. I think it took a little while to figure even that out, because even with CSS 3 you had everything with the prefixes that was annoying. That happened with Flexbox and a bit with Grid, but since then they've realized let's just put stuff behind flags instead, so it's not hitting production with 10 different, well, it wasn't that bad, but
it was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad.
Is this Mozilla prefix? Is this?
So yeah, they've and then I think that just once sort of they got past that and some of the bigger things like grid, I think it just opened the door to like allow for progress to start going a lot faster because everything could be independent from one another.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now there's lots of cool stuff happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing with JavaScript, right? Everything kind of stalled out for many years, and then everybody was so exciting about the ES 2015 revolution.
Yeah.
And then now and then 2020 slowed everything down. And then now, like, I feel like last year, that standards event that happened in Spain kind of tried to speed everything up. I'm personally excited about signals landing in the browser by the end of the year, which is really cool. But there were a lot of other things. Oh, sorry. Observables landing in the browser, not signals. I don't know where the signals proposal is right now. But, I mean, hopefully that happens at some point in time. So it's really cool, again, just to see, like, innovation waking up, if you will.
Definitely, yeah. And, I mean, speaking of JavaScript, I think going back to CSS in a way and HTML too, what's fun for me, at least, since I live on the CSS world a lot more, is that they're looking at a lot of the things that people have been doing with JavaScript traditionally that is hard, and especially hard to do it right, and they're trying to bring that to, those are some of the things that are coming to the spec now are things that make it a lot easier, either small amounts of JavaScript or no JavaScript for some of them. So you have like scroll-driven animations that are coming now, so you can do full scroll-based animations. I wouldn't go as far as like replacing GSAP or something like that, where you're really pushing. But if you're using like intersection observers, don't really know if there's going to be a use case for them anymore, because you can, like, even the syntax is really, if you're used to using an intersection observer, you could follow how it would work with CSS. And that it's like a browser level API, so you can actually do it through JavaScript too, like getting to the same API that the CSS version's using. It's really cool. That one has a polyfill right now that's so-so, but I've been using it because you can use it as a progressive enhancement. So if the browser supports it, you get your fancy animations. If not, you don't have it, but it's everything, as long as you plan for it, everything's still on the page. And yeah, you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. There's modals and popovers now.
Yeah.
So the popover one, I just found out, I don't want to get misquoted, but I'm like 95% sure GitHub's actually replaced all their menus with popovers now. They're using the polyfill because that one's really good. And the cool thing with the popover by itself is you can use it for tooltips, you can use it for other stuff like that, which is super useful. It comes with, like, you can open it in different ways, but if you don't use JavaScript, you just need like whatever your like a button or something like that, and it's popover target equals, and then if the other element has an ID on it, it opens, and then it comes with a light dismiss. So you can click outside of it, it closes by itself.
Does it have that kind of like portal effect, where you can put kind of content wherever you need it to be, or is it localized, or like how do you position it, I guess?
Yeah, it technically could be anywhere.
Okay.
You probably be, I haven't played with it a ton, but it would probably be easier to deal with just for positioning and other stuff.
Yeah.
Except, saying that, the other thing that I feel goes really well with that is anchor positioning, which is the really exciting thing that isn't. Popovers you can probably use now, maybe with the polyfill you definitely could. No, I don't remember what the support is. There's so many things coming out now, it's not in my head. Yeah, but I think even I might be mixing up the polyfill too with the anchor positioning one, because anchor positioning solves the problem of you have a tooltip that opens, but the item's at the top of the page, so you actually need it to open on the bottom instead of the top, or it's close to the left or the right, and that's like there's JavaScript libraries out there to solve all of that.
If you've ever written the code for it, it's such a pain.
Yeah. And you think you've got
such a small feature at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you think you've gotten every edge case, and then there's 5 more that you didn't think of. Yeah. So now it's literally just like open on it. The basics of it are a little bit like you name the parent, or so this could be anywhere in your site, and then you're just saying you name the popover, like the parent, whatever it's going to be, or the anchor parent. And then the element, you click open and you say like bottom 5, and it'd be 5 pixels off the bottom of it. And then there's regions, so you can have it stretch the bottom and like off to the left and right, only off to the left, only off to the right. You have the sides, the top. And then the cool part is there's the next part of it where you have like I don't remember the name of it, but it's like sort of, if that didn't work, like you supply it with alternatives. So if it's too close to the top of the page, try this instead. And if it doesn't fit there, try this instead. And it's always going to go to where it has room. And even if you change the browser size, like live, it will jump to wherever it needs to be to stay in view without any JavaScript. So it's kind of cool.
Okay, but I don't think I've ever asked a CSS person about this. So how do you feel about Sass, Less, SCSS, Tailwind?
Yeah.
Vibes.
Different classes of
There's
things.
like,
Yeah,
yes.
I'll take that in a few different parts. So I still use Sass for larger projects. Modern, we have nesting in native CSS now. Browser sort's not perfect, but it's there. So that was one of the things that people use Sass or Less for, was nesting.
Exactly. Yep.
So if that's all you use it for, then you probably won't need it for much longer. But if you're using mix-ins, custom functions, loops, especially loops, I find really useful. So I still feel it has a little bit of a place for the right type of project.
So you're not like, use the platform.
I'm a very big, I'm a very big use. Like, if James asked me like, what's like your ideal tech stack, and I'm like, vanilla everything. Just go I'm super, like if
But
you
there's
can.
still a use case. There's still
Yeah, for sure. And again, it always depends on the scale and the size of the project and what you need to do, because I could say that and then you tell me your use case and I'd be like, you probably don't want to do that.
It's crazy the evolution, right? Because I feel like the 2015, 2016 timeframe, Sass was just such a, I don't know if it even still is, because I haven't really hung out in that crowd for a really long time, but the Sass community was so strong, so vibrant. It was like, wow, is that still like that, or?
Not as much.
Yeah, okay.
It's still there, but it's definitely,
because the
the
platform
energy
has gotten
behind
better.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the features, and you even have Miriam Susan, who's one of the core maintainers of Sass now. She also works on the spec, so she's bringing
She's bringing those concepts. To the platform.
So nesting. I don't know if she was responsible for nesting or not. I don't think so, but she's working now on a mix-in spec for
Amazing.
the native platform. Yeah,
That's really cool.
and I think custom functions, but I'm not sure.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, so they're working on bringing some of these things into the native language. So yeah, it makes it a lot easier.
Tailwind.
My answer for Tailwind is
How much trouble you want to get? Very careful.
I get why people like it, but it's not for me.
Sure.
Yeah. Mostly, part of the reason for that is definitely because I do have a large beginner audience, and I see beginners coming in that are using it in situations where you shouldn't be. Like they're vanilla HTML and using Tailwind, and it just, without components, it doesn't really make sense. And then I do also feel that sometimes it leads to an over-componentization of things, because even if you had like 5 list items, well, it makes more sense to turn that list item into a component, so then you're only putting all those classes on it once instead of having to repeat it on.
That's really fascinating, because that's actually part of the reason why he made the library was to prevent that. So it's kind of a weird sort of unintended consequence if it's actually now circled all the way back around to perpetuating the thing he was trying to stop.
Yeah, because I find like is it called Catalyst? There's like, it's a Tailwind, it's with the Tailwind guys anyway, they built it, and everything, like it's like list item with capital L because it's a component, like everything is a component. And for me, I'm like, well then just use a class, like it's hit that, like you said, you've hit the point where it's just redoing what—
The snake suddenly ate its tail.
Exactly, yeah. I do think there's good use cases for it. But yeah, there's times, and the other thing with beginners too is sometimes they start using that without understanding enough of the core language, and I feel like that leads to problems down the line as well.
Sometimes that happens with Sass. That's back in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I've experienced that when I've gone back and wrote vanilla CSS again, and I was like, why doesn't this work? And I was like, oh wait, that's all Sass syntax. Yeah. Whoops.
And you'd get it a lot with Bootstrap back in the day when that was the platform, because you'd learn how to use that, and then you'd have how do I fix this one thing, and have no idea because you don't know enough of the language that you're using to do it. And as someone who just, I write it all the time, so I just see like the problems that people run into. I'm like, this could be solvable if you just dove a little bit deeper into like the core language before making that next step.
It very much, this idea of people being frustrated with it. Like, I'm not going to use a platform because I don't understand it, so I'm going to build something to solve my problem. And then, some people don't like that specific, like Tailwind, they don't like that technology because they don't understand it. And then they decide to build something else or do something else. And all these workarounds in technology just because people aren't taking the time and the energy to learn deeper, go a little bit deeper. You could have gone a little bit 20% deeper, and maybe you wouldn't be running into these problems, and maybe the platform would have been fine.
Yeah, it's true. And there are some things that I think these are created for because there are pain points that they try and solve. But as the platform, like as CSS is growing, I'm curious how Tailwind's going to incorporate some of the things that are coming. Just because there's you have scope styles are coming now, so it addresses it's something like you get in Vue or Svelte or whatever, where you just have a style tag within your component. Obviously, native CSS is different, but it's just at scope. You put the class name or whatever, and you can scope it to that. But then you can take it to the next level because you can actually say, scope, to my article, but don't go into the call to action that's in my article. So you can control the scope to the where it's starting and where it's ending, which is really interesting.
This is kind of where the shadow DOM stuff developments with web components really came in. It's if you've worked in web components, sometimes it's one of the best and most infuriating parts of it is having to deal with the shadow DOM and kind of how it breaks the cascade. Sometimes.
And I think they're trying to make improvements there. I think the implementation there seemed like a really this is exactly what we need, and then after working with it, people are like, this doesn't work the way we want it to.
Well, it's really good when the web components are things that you're giving someone. But really frustrating because some tools like Lit is phenomenal. I've really enjoyed using it. But when you use it like you would use a React or Angular, and you're just building only your own components, you end up tripping over the shadow DOM way more than you end up benefiting from it, because you're like, these are my components, I don't need them fully encapsulated.
Exactly.
I want a little bit of that flexibility.
Yeah, it can be frustrating for sure. And I know they're doing some work on it, I think, that will make it a little bit more robust.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we've seen the memes, the CSS is hard memes. We've seen the Simpsons GIFs of trying to open Windows. Is this a bad rap that CSS is getting here? And if so, what are the things that people really need to be learning so that this isn't the big deal? Because I just think we're not doing a very good job of teaching those fundamentals of CSS. Because we consider the fundamentals to be the tags and the values rather than the cascade, or rather than the positioning model and things like that. So what are we just not teaching ourselves so that we can stop with these memes?
Yeah, I think the way I usually look at it is CSS tricks people into seeming like a simpler language than it is.
Yeah. Because
of that, it's declarative. Property.
CSS tricks people. I'm like, you're talking about CSS tricks.com.
So it's it's property value pairs. That's easy. And then you start learning it, and it's color red, background blue. Oh, look, it's working. This isn't easy. It's a simple language. And then you get through some of the basics. You think you get it, and then all of a sudden it gets hard. And it's because it's declarative, where it's one for one, except then you do a display flex, and then just doing that one thing gives you 8 new properties that have a whole bunch of new values in there. So you pulled one lever, and then you had 10 new levers that all just showed up that you have to be able to control and understand. And you get that all over the place just with some of the simple stuff. But, so I think it's exactly what you said, learning a bit more of the fundamentals. And I often say, once people have been doing it for a little while, go back to the beginner lessons, which can be really hard because you don't want to go back to the beginner stuff and you're like, oh, the box model, I get this, whatever. But just going into some of the earlier things, because when you learn anything, there is some cognitive overload that's going to happen. And I think what happens is you're focused on learning 500 properties and 1,000 values that you're just being bombarded with for everything. So you understand there is a box model and the basics of it, but maybe there's a bit more to it that you didn't actually get. And there's collapsing margins that come into it, and they're just annoying, and you heard about it, but you didn't really understand what it meant because it didn't matter at the time, and you were more focused on memorizing all of these properties and values that you were going through. And then there definitely are parts that I think aren't taught enough. And you just mentioned, there's formatting contexts. And I could say that to somebody, and most people would be like, what's a formatting context? They just wouldn't have an idea of that.
What is a formatting context?
So you just have we talk about block and inline. So those are 2 formatting contexts. Flex and grid have formatting contexts. Not exactly, but Yeah, so you can actually create new formatting contexts using different display types and stuff like that. And then, yeah, and they all have like implications on how the page ends up getting rendered. They're not these huge, well, if you read the spec, it can be really confusing because the spec is a bit hard to go through, but MDM or whatever usually has a really better breakdown of how they work and the consequences. And it's all these little things usually that trip people up and get them frustrated with it. And the other part with that is once you start understanding the way the language works, and because once you start getting into that sort of core level stuff, you start seeing that like, okay, it didn't work the way I expected it to, but there's actually a reason it works the way it does. Whereas I think what happens for a lot of people is like, this is stupid, it didn't work.
Well, I like that because that's what I found when I was at my peak of CSS knowledge. It faded a little bit, but when I was really, really into it, what I was surprised about is that you can debug CSS. Some people think it's purely magical. You throw some things, it works. Try this, that works. And that's that meme that people send. But you can debug CSS. A lot of people don't realize that, and it's like really cool once you see that. It's like that Matrix moment that suddenly switches over, and you're like, oh, I'm seeing it now.
Yeah, it's cool when that happens, and the dev tools these days are so much better than they ever were before too. So like that always helps that you can.
Yeah, it used to just be in Firefox. They had some amazing ones with trying to figure out like, where is this Flexbox situation going on?
Yeah.
Why did this one suddenly collapse down to nothingness and this one sized appropriately? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I think also this idea of, I mean, you think about it, right? You talked about senior developers needing to go back to kind of the basics to really fully understand something, or you see people get frustrated, and you're like, well, let's just get back to the fundamentals. It's a really great opportunity for junior developers to truly understand something, because they're going to understand something so specialized, so fine-tuned, to where they can add a lot of value to and knowledge to senior developers that might not have the time or energy to do so. So it's just a great opportunity for people to try to be successful in this one little way. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And if you can explain to somebody why something's happening.
Yes.
Like
that's the hugest thing.
Yeah. The first time I stood in the classroom, I was teaching for a few years, and the first time we were still doing float layouts back then. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna, tried to prepare my lesson. And then I'm like, I just have no idea. Like, how do I explain this? And it was a weird concept, but like, if you can figure out how to explain something, like you make connections, and so many other things start making sense as soon as you start trying to like verbalize and understand it enough to say what actually happened there.
I have been keeping eyes on it, but where are we on the state of like browser discrepancies? Because I saw a funny tweet a week or so ago that said, if your code works in Safari without any errors, you waited too long to ship. And I just like that, because I've definitely been there before. But I think that's another one of those things that frustrates people sometimes, is that it just, CSS, I mean, as much as JavaScript, as much as HTML, I'm sure, just has this cruft built up from having to evolve in this fast-moving production ecosystem. So I don't know, where are we right now with that? Is it getting better now in general, or is it still just a thing you just have to be aware of?
It's much better.
Oh,
I guess it depends how far back people's experience are with it. Like if anyone did IE6 or earlier, then
goodness.
but this, I think the main pain point now is just like there's a new feature, and then I want to use it, but I can't yet.
Right.
And you'll see that most of the time, like the modern browsers are all like the newest release will support it, but you still got to wait a while for that to catch up for a big enough percent of your audience to actually be using it. You see the same with JavaScript too.
The evergreen browsers, evergreen versions of the browsers has fixed that maybe a little bit, but you still have the lag time.
There is the lag time there, so that's frustrating. And there is a little bit, like Safari, there was the joke that Safari is the new Internet Explorer. They put a lot of money into it more recently.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, I've been surprised at how much they're moving.
Yeah, so they've been first to ship a lot of new features. There's a few legacy bugs that...
And people are always like, ooh, they agreed to do something? That's interesting. It's just a shocked that Safari is actually doing things.
Yeah, and for CSS specifically now, there's I'm going to forget the name of it. There's a thing where it's all the browsers that get together every year, and they're like, here's the features that we want to make sure they have all their tests they do, and we want 100% support for this feature by the end of the year.
That's really good. So I think it's hard, and it's crazy to see standards moving so fast, and all I think about is the refactoring that is required in order to make in order to use the latest and the greatest, and that's why developers will always have a job.
Yeah.
There's always some refactoring that needs to be done, but as all these new standards come out and all these new ways, as all these new standards come out, what is your recommendation for people going back and refactoring their code? Should they? Why? What's the business use case for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it, if there's performance improvements, I think that's usually because there you can actually have a metric that it's better for the user because the site loads
just ripped
faster.
out Tailwind and you can use the platform now. So
Yeah.
you're good.
So anything that reduces, and for example, these new things that are coming to CSS now that mean you don't need JavaScript for something. If you can take out some, I think use JavaScript for what you need it for. But if you need to ship less JavaScript to the client, that's usually a good thing. So for things like that, I think it could definitely be worth it. If it's, your layouts are made with Flex and you want to bring in Grid because it's an older thing, you probably, maybe new stuff could use it, but are you really going to see a huge benefit? I guess it depends on, is it a legacy project that's sitting there and won't change much, or is it still going to be developed? And so there's probably more trade-offs in trying to figure out what's there. But I think, shipping or just performance is probably the easiest one to justify to stakeholders anyway.
Favorite resources for CSS for those listening?
Definitely the MDN. And what a lot of people don't, because everybody associates MDM with Mozilla. It's not with Mozilla anymore.
Wow,
They
I
made
did
it.
Is it like the foundation or something? Yeah, it's the.
So it's
Oh, the
not
Mozilla
even.
Foundation,
No, it's
it's
not
not
even.
even anymore.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's sort of run by. I don't even know who's in charge of it. I think it's sort of more of a grouping
Open
of the different
sourcey.
browser things.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
But it's actually a non-profit that does almost all of the work for it now, called, I'm going to forget the name, Open
JS Foundation? No.
Open
Keep guessing,
something.
Tracy.
I'm really sorry I forgot what it is. But if anybody relies, there must be links somewhere on the MDM for it, but if anyone relies on it a ton, it could be a good thing because I know they need funding desperately.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So just to keep it going, because if you use it a lot, just tell your company these. I wouldn't be able to do my job without them,
Right.
And that could be a good thing just as a support for them.
Favorite CSS conferences?
CSS Day.
CSS Day, okay. Any others or?
That's the only one I know that's really just CSS. Which I got to speak at it this year, so that was pretty
Yay.
cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a huge. I actually wanted to work up to that one as that was the one I wanted to speak at eventually, and let me get some experience. And then they're like, "Do you want to speak at it this year?" I'm like, "Are you sure?" But I didn't want to pass up the opportunity either, so sure, let's go. And,
I was overhearing some people talking about Render and how you work up to speaking at Render, and I'm thinking, why don't you just apply? Don't put things in front of you that are unnecessarily roadblocks to the success that you want to achieve in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's right. Yeah, it was definitely a bit nerve-wracking going into such a big one so early in my speaking career, let's say, but. I'm happy I did it, and I wouldn't change my mind on that one.
Well, it's funny because some people see your channel and just think that, well, if I had a platform that big, et cetera, and I think that's maybe really good for people to hear. That even with a platform the size that you have, you're still wondering whether you're ready for that stage.
Oh, yeah. That was a major imposter syndrome moment for me. Yeah, and especially at that one, it's you had people that work on the spec directly are front row, and I'm like, I don't know as much as these. There's people that I learned everything from are in the audience, and so it was
that's really intimidating.
Yeah.
We were doing a talk earlier, and it was quotes from different engineering leaders, and some of them were in the audience, and then they came up and they said, "Oh, that was a really good job," and we were like, "Did we represent your words okay?" That was really funny. Yeah.
Well, cool, awesome. Tell us again where we can find you.
Yeah, so on Twitter or X, it's Kevin J. Powell, and on YouTube, just look up CSS, and I'll pop up somewhere.
Amazing. Okay, very cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Definitely check out Kevin on the internet, and we hope you get more excited about CSS, because I definitely am. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's exciting to see things move forward. It's exciting to see innovation happen. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.